What do we got here, Stav?
This is a 2004 Touareg motor, 3.2.
AKA
R32 motor.
R32. What are the differences? What are the similarities?
It's actually the exact same motor, minus the accessories because it's longitude mounted.
And then the oil pan is different too.
Correct, yeah, but the base motor is exactly the same, so it's good for motor to send to a machine shop and build a motor on.
And then why do we chase after only the 2004s?
It has a cast crank in it and a few other parts that are different from the Mark V, like the intermediate shaft.
So this actually has a forged crank.
Forged crank, even though we're not going to use it because we're going to be using the 12-valve 2.8 crank in this thing.
To make it an R30, correct. So the differences are between the R32, between the years, and the R32 and the Volkswagen, the Mark IV, it was a special year because, again, they only came with a forged crank. With stuff, we ended up figuring out that the Touareg, Cayennes, and a couple other cars ended up coming with the same 3.2 in this year, the 2004 Touareg. So we're over here dumpster diving here in Sun Valley, and this is what we do when we want to get a cheap motor for a couple $100 as opposed to paying a couple thousand for them. 3.2 forged crank. We're going to be yanking that, putting the 2.8 forged crank to make an R30, and then some custom internals. But again, like I stated in our last couple videos, these go for anywhere between $200 to $400 as opposed to, you know, paying, you know, $1,500 to $2,000 retail for them. So we're out here just yanking this motor out now, and we're going to use this for the build and leave the motor that's currently being for mock-up inside the RS3, so we don't have to go install, send it out, and not have a car for mock-up. So we're going to take this apart here in a future episode, showcase the internals, talk about what we're going to be doing, talking about the parts we're going to be ordering and ordered already. Hopefully they come in by the time we do that video for the build. Yeah. Say about another hour stuff. We're about an hour and a half into it. What do you think?
We're actually 40 minutes into it, but you're terrible with time. But what do you call?
I'm thinking
45 minutes will be out.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
So we have George working underneath, getting all the transmission bolts out. We got.
Dude, have you ever seen underneath this car?
No, I have not.
So give me the camera. Let me show him. Check this out.
So the Touareg doesn't have, I don't know, it's kind of like weird all-wheel drive. So it's got this shaft that goes to the front to another transfer case in the front, and that goes to axles in the left and right that goes underneath the motor. And then when it goes to the back, it goes to a transfer case that then again transfers the power from the transmission, and then it goes to a drive shaft in the back. So this is what powers the front wheels, and that's what powers the rear wheels. It looks so weird. It's kind of like a version of Haldex, except upside down. That looks cool. Anyway, I'm undoing the bolts now underneath the car to the transmission, and then in about the next 20 minutes we should be able to just pull this motor. We got to go grab one of the hoists here at the junkyard, but pretty much undoing all the bolts here on the back side, and then I'm going to undo this shifter cable so I can access these top bolts, and then we should be good to go, minus all the wires and all the other stuff we cut on the top.
All right, so the one thing that really sucked about this stuff is the front end, man. That thing was forever to take off. I know it's going to come off in just a couple seconds here, but we struggled with this thing for like 15 minutes.
No, you struggled with it for 15 minutes.
We struggled with it. That thing sucked, man.
You can clearly see that I knew exactly what I was doing, and I had the shades on.
Once the front end got removed, everything else was pretty straightforward in this car. The back bolts and the bell housing, all the little supplemental accessories, most of the wires and hoses we cut.
Damn, watching this video, it looks like I did 90% of the work.
Yeah, okay, you're playing on your phone right there. What are you talking about? And then there's a section where I'm playing on my phone too. But overall, I'd say it was pretty easy. Again, the rental on the lift was about $20. 2 hours in and out, and we were able to snack this motor. What do you think?
Easy.
Yeah, I think it was easy too. It was pretty smooth.
All right, so we finally got this bad boy out. Had to rent. And it's not that bad. It was only $20, and if you're done within 2 hours, you get most of your money back pretty much. It's $5 for every half hour for $20.
It's got a bigger axle than an F-150.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's got a little steering wheel on it too, but we got the motor out. Not going to say we didn't cut a few things out, but the 3.2 is out. And again, really cool that we're able to get these motors out of the junkyard. Again, this is an R32 block out of a Touareg. Same motor that's in the 2004 R32 minus the oil pan, minus the flywheel, and obviously all the other accessories. Pretty much it's set up for a longitudinal, you know, SUV. But I'm telling you, this is super, super cool. So it's not all in all 2.5 hours?
No, it's 2 hours.
12 o'clock, yeah.
12 o'clock.
Ooh, all right.
We got all the pigtails, so we'll need that when we retrofit the harness for the VRS3. So, you know, we got everything we're going to need here, it looks like.
Well, now we got to get this on top of here, and then roll this thing all the way to the back there and go pay for it. Yeah, and then we'll update it as soon as we get it into the truck. All right, stuff. So we are back. We have the 3.2 liter here in the garage now. Out of total, we got there at what time?
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock, and we were done roughly what, 12:30?
We were gone by 12 o'clock.
12 o'clock. So about 2 hours, and I'll put a couple screenshots right here of some of the things that we were doing. And of course, you'll see it in the time lapse of what we had to do to get this motor out of the 2004 Touareg. But stuff, can you talk a little bit more about the 2004 Touareg and why do we aim for that vehicle when it comes for R32 engines? Because it's not an R32, it's a Touareg, right?
Well, it is an R32. Essentially, the motor, it comes with a forged crank, which is exactly what the 2004s did, versus the 2005s that had the cast cranks.
Correct. So only that year. And what was so significant about the 2004 is that also had the Mark IV R32. So that also came with the forged crank, and that's why we call these the R32 motors, is that they use the same exact motors in the 2004 Touaregs. I'm not sure if the 2004 Cayennes also came with the 3.2s.
Yes, they did.
Did they?
Yes.
With the forged crank?
Correct.
So you'd have to look at the Cayennes and also the Touaregs in terms of trying to find these cars.
But it's going to be hard to find a Cayenne in an LKQ pickup part, where you find these pretty common. And we happen to find one pretty local. We only have to drive 60 miles.
So what's the retail cost of this motor if someone were to buy it off of eBay right now?
$25.99. $2,599.
So usually the heads alone sell for about over $1,200. And the kind of cool thing is, on the last video we mentioned, hey, you know, we get these motors from $200 to $500, and people are like, it's crazy. eBay's selling them for this. This local junkyard's selling them for this.
So, I mean, one of the things that a lot of some people do know is that these motors came in the Touareg, so that's what we go for, and it ends up being the same exact motor versus mounts or whatever, but we're not using any of that anyway.
And then why does this motor so cheap as opposed to people going to like engine rebuilders or eBay trying to buy them for $2,500? Why do we get this for about $500 to $600? Which, by the way, I'm going to give you guys a screenshot real quick of the receipt to showcase what the cost was of this engine today and why we were able to pay under $600 for this engine, fully assembled, more or less, with all the accessories for a forged 3.2 R32 motor out of a Touareg stuff. Can you enlighten us a little bit?
Because this motor came in a family sedan, and most people look for the R32 direct, not knowing that this is the exact same motor.
Okay, another quick heads up too. We actually pulled this motor, as you'll see with the time lapse.
Well, I pulled the motor. You were there, yes. I pulled the motor.
Lies. So we pulled the motor out of this car, as opposed to you going somewhere and paying, you know, someone a retail value of this engine for about maybe $2,200, maybe. You're pulling this at a pull apart. So essentially we went to a local junkyard down in LA in Sun Valley, and we were able to pull this engine on ourselves. They have engine lifts, which you'll see us using here shortly. They'll also have tools that you could rent. There's vendors outside, so if people get stuck without having the proper tools, you could buy them, power tools.
People are going to ask, where did you come up with this amazing idea, maybe possibly at 9 o'clock last night?
Very humble.
To go to a pickup part today and know that there was going to be a tow right
there.
So
Stav comes over. I'm working in the garage about Saturday, like 3 o'clock in the morning. He's like, dude, there's a junkyard that's open between, what time?
8 to 5. And
I'm like, man, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. He's like, let's go grab another spare 3.2. We don't have to yank the one out of the RS3, which we're going to talk about here in a second. And he goes, we'll have a spare motor to build, and then we can still mock up everything in the RS3, which we're going to go over and talk about now. So, Stav, very rare, but he had a good idea. We want to keep this motor in this car. And again, the turbo is just kind of sitting on some stuff we set up in the back. It's still not even properly mocked up. We're waiting on a tubular manifold from HST. We are waiting on a few other goodies to arrive for this car, such as
fuel rail
that Stav ended up getting me for my birthday, along with this little goodie too, which we're going to have a future video on for the install. This little 034 MotorSport DSG catch can, as we're going to be using it. Initially, I wanted to, here's the secret with that, and we'll talk about it in a future video.
Correct.
We wanted to make our own, but Stav ended up, he's like, well, George, I've seen you weld.
Yeah, correct.
And he's like, I'm going to get you something that's really nice and fits nice and works real well.
Correct. With this beautiful engine bay, the last thing I want to do is see a weld. Because everyone will be like, well, not look at this billet valve cover. And we'll be like, who welded that up? George. You know what I mean? So we just decided to get a pre-made one that we know works.
All right, so there's a lot of things that we still have to fabricate on this engine. So the theory of having a spare 3.2 to build, to break down, which we're going to be kicking off a build series here in the next couple of weeks, fully doing the R32, into the R30, showcasing all the parts that we're using, the methods. We're also going to be talking about O-ringing a motor, which we've never done before, which we're going to get into now that Stav's car is making 46 PSI on his 12 valve, and he's looking to go with a bigger turbo. He's waiting for the 105 69S from Zona, and I went with the giant Garrett MMS 1450, aka G42 1450.
Something they stole the name from us.
We're gonna need something a little bit more set up, and as you get more competitive and more power, a lot more people are O-ringing this motors, and we're gonna showcase this here. How to VR6
and
O-ring
some other
setup.
goodies about keeping the head from lifting. You know, that we talked about, like the
Like
larger
Stav
studs.
upgrading to a 24 valve.
That is not happening. What do you call drilling out for larger studs in this motor?
Correct. So aside from that, guys, we're going to keep this motor in this car. We're going to wait for the tubular manifold to come from HST. We're going to set up all the fueling systems, the coolant lines, intercooler piping. And while that's happening, we can stay
Pretty active.
pretty active, and we can get good amount of progress in this while that motor is getting broken down and built. Now, we're going to be doing the assembly here. We're going to be building that fucker here, but the machining, we're going to reach out to a few people. We're still trying to nail down a shop to do. It doesn't seem anywhere near LA wants to do O-ringing and proper machining for VR6, so we may reach out to someone in New York, as there seems to be a lot more shops, especially machine shops out east, that are willing to do the machine work.
Just in general, that the VR6 community or Volkswagen community is larger back east, so all the performance stuff, they're set up for it. We're out here, a lot of the, even when we were doing my motor, certain machine shops didn't even know how to assemble the head on the VR6.
Yeah, correct. And that's something that we're not looking to do either. I'm not looking to assemble a head or lap valves or anything, but build a bottom end, spec it out, gap the rings, that's all us. We've been doing that on our 24 valve, the 12 valves.
All day.
And that's why we had so many issues with the 12 valve.
All day.
All right, so we're going to close off this video. Again, just a small insight on what we do.
One more time. All day.
We want to showcase you guys again how we pay $500 for these motors, how we get them, and yes, it is labor intensive. You do have to put in the effort to go and get them. They don't just arrive at your door for $500. We actually had to go and pull it out of a junkyard and spend the day in 100-degree heat to go rip it out to get the motor.
96-degree day. Again, he's over exaggerating.
So guys, without further ado, this is going to be the end of this video. Next, we're going to talk about some goodies for the DSG catch can from 034, the fuel rail that's going to be arriving. Hopefully by then we'll have some coolant lines and all that mocked up so we can have a little bit more progress on this car. Stav, can you give us an update really quick on where we're going to get a video on your car on the 12 valve? When's that coming?
Well, that's a very interesting question. When I receive my turbo. I mean, so hopefully the next 10 days to 2 weeks, we'll have my turbo here, and then we'll start changing. We're going to be doing some changes to my setup also. Even though it's running perfectly, like every VR6 setup, if it's running perfectly, you got to change it.
All right, guys, without further ado, that's going to be the end of this video. We appreciate you guys watching. And as always, I'm George.
I'm Stav.
This is Malaka MotorSports, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you next time.